As early as 1970, during the UN conference on the environment here in Stockholm, cooperation on the Baltic began. And this was an interesting example of where actually countries, the Soviet bloc and the Western community could cooperate even though you had the Iron Curtain in place. So water resources here serve as an example to address other much broader political issues as well. The cost of deteriorating water resources is significant, and in the case of the Baltic, you can see that in two aspects: eutrophication, the added amounts of nutrients to the system, and overfishing. And the cost of that has been calculated in a recent Baltic Stern report, influenced by the climate change report, to be about 2 billion euro each year. So now we're talking quite significant amounts of lost revenue. Cooperation is necessary also from an economic perspective.
Water over water is not rational, and it's not necessary. You may actually be able to ameliorate the risk of war through accessing the global food market, and thereby by importing the food, you will also import a lot of water that you will not have in your own territory. Furthermore, it's not rational to try to conquer foreign territory in order to gain their water resources, because according to international law, if you conquer a territory, you are obliged as an occupier to supply that population with water. So it would be hard to see anyone through military means actually being able to secure more water resources for themselves. There are more opportunities for collaboration and benefits to be derived from using the water within a regional perspective. By, for example, putting a dam in the most optimal place, you can access more hydropower, and by irrigating in the most optimal place and having water for tourism in the best place in the region, you are actually increasing the pie, and you can share the benefits from that increased pie rather than focusing on the water allocation and the division of those allocations. Over 200 agreements have been signed over international or shared waters in the last 60 years or so. And only 37 conflictive events has occurred during this period as well. So there's an overall tendency to move more in towards cooperative manner or sharing the water than actually to enter into conflict over it. Often states enter dialogue or negotiations with an I gain, you lose mentality. But if they refrain from doing that and enter into dialogue with each other, trying to view the basin as a whole, then there are larger opportunities for actually sharing the benefits that might be derived from using the water more optimal on the basin level. That you can do by, for example, putting dams in the most optimal place in the basin and irrigate where it's most rational to irrigate, as well as have tourism industry developed in the part of the basin where it's most rational to have that. Transboundary groundwater is a growing problem in the Middle East and in the world. The Israelis and the Palestinians, they share predominantly groundwater, and what we can see happening in that case is that because of the scarcity as well as because of the conflict, the political conflict that's ongoing, there is an over-abstraction of the groundwater with the results that we see today, saltwater intrusion into the groundwater, meaning that part of the groundwater is not possible to use in the future, which of course exacerbates the conflict even further. Even in places like the Middle East, where you perhaps would expect that they would mostly have a conflictive approach to water resources, you can see quite interesting examples of cooperation. Israel and Jordan actually has a peace agreement since 1994, and within that it's a clause that says that Jordan is able to store winter water when they get the most water, into Lake Tiberias within Israel. And Israel then releases this water during the summer, which makes it possible for Amman, the capital of Jordan, to have enough water during the dry summer months. And this is an example of quite an advanced stage of cooperation.
Often in international negotiations over shared waters between countries, we stumble upon disputes over how we can share the volumes of water, the flow of water between countries. And our idea is that we should rather focus on how we can share the benefits of the water to the society. Just to give you two concrete examples. An upstream country can, for example, build a hydropower plant producing electricity that can be shared with the downstream country. Or, if it's more suitable to grow food in the downstream country in a floodplain, that food can be shared with the upstream country. When we look at the availability of water resources in the world, we can see that in many regions, in river basins, and when it comes to groundwater aquifers, the resources are being depleted. And primarily because of the use of water for agricultural production. And if we then take into account the population growth and the need to produce food for increasing populations, we can easily realize that these challenges will increase quite dramatically when it comes to the availability of the water resource. So conflicts will increase in the future, but there are ways to deal with this apart from going over war to water. There are a number of emerging challenges when it comes to the water situation around the world, and especially as an effect of climate change. We see droughts in many parts of the world, Australia with the devastating fires, southern USA, California, China, Africa, and we also see in other regions melting glaciers. All in all, this has enormous effects on the water resources that needs to be dealt with urgently. Cities are the main engines for economic growth, and as a result of this, the water demand is increasing. And they are pumping today water and transporting water longer and longer distances. This leads to a conflict between the cities and the surrounding rural areas, a conflict between the needs for industrial development and the development of the city as such, and the agricultural areas around the world where the food production takes place. And this is an issue, a huge challenge that decision makers, governments and planners need to address urgently.